One of the big constant problems we saw during the whole Brexit, and even still continuing, of course, now, is the idea of a land border. Now, a lot of people prior to Brexit, and certainly back in 2016, were saying this isn't going to be a problem because our only land border is with Northern Ireland. That's going to be an easy problem. This is, Northern Ireland, not going to be a problem. Of course, Kate Hoey, the big promoter that Northern Ireland wasn't going to be a problem. And of course, she is the biggest, should we say, complainers when it comes to the current situation, which is a situation she created and apparently at the time wanted, but then now doesn't want, as again with the DUP, they apparently wanted this, then they didn't want this, and well, it's their bed, they've got a lie in it. Like say, this was apparently the Brexit they wanted, and then have decided, well, actually, no, we don't want this type of Brexit. But for those of you who are, shall we say, aware of the UK's land borders, will be probably aware of be saying, hey, bowler hat man, that's wrong. That's not our only land border we have with the EU. And you would be right, because this video is about the land border we have with Gibraltar, because this is yet another Brexit flashpoint which has not yet flared up, but I think is highly likely to, with huge things that Spain could actually do to Gibraltar, such as saying, well, you know what? We're no longer going to accept garbage shipments because Gibraltar is so small, it doesn't have its own garbage dump. The garbage dump is across the border. So Spain could effectively just say, we're not going to accept that. And then you could just see garbage piles in Gibraltar just start piling high until the government decides to, well, effectively come to the table on this. So it looks like that there is going to be potentially another flashpoint, as there is a general election happening in Spain in the not too distant future, and Gibraltar is being used potentially as a flashpoint. So this really could be yet another Brexit frontier, and ultimately, I think it would be one that once again we would lose. And to be honest, it's going to be funny seeing the Brexiteers lose their mind if Rishi Sunak, out of sheer pragmatism, decides to give up Gibraltar. So let's go into this and find out what is going on here, because again, this is yet another part of Brexit, which back in 2016 never reported on. Brexiteers said it was not going to be a problem because I would have to say we were going to remain in the single market and customs union until, of course, we weren't. And then so many problems potentially happening down in Gibraltar. So let's get into it. But before we do that, though, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, there is the YouTube thank you button, and of course the Pony Club, and all the good stuff down below. So always do remember, like I say, even if you just press the like and share button, like I say, thank you very much. So let's get on with this. So this comes from The Independent with the title of Gibraltar's Fear of Being the Last Brexit Frontier. 20 years ago, a bronze statue of a man with a bicycle was erected on the border between Gibraltar and Spain in homage to the thousands of Spanish workers who make the journey every day to the Rock to work and then return at night. When he created that work, the late sculptor Naho Farales was envisaging the way the British overseas territory and Spain depended on each other. But fast forward to today, the relationship could be under threat, as negotiations between Britain and Spain over how this border will be managed in the post-Brexit era are in limbo. A deal has been up very much over the disagreements concerning the role of the Spanish police on the Schengen border, with the Spanish ambitions to partly manage the Gibraltar airport, which falls within the Rock. But across the border, the decision by the Spanish Socialist Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, to call a snap election for the 23rd of July in the wake of a disastrous local election results could create even further problems, as a series of polls do suggest that the Conservative People's Party will gain the most votes, but it is unlikely to win enough seats to form a government and may depend on the support of the far-right Vox Party to rule. Additionally, the possibility of a right-wing government in Madrid will also spread fear amongst the 34,000 inhabitants of the Rock, a tiny isthmus at the foot of southern Spain, saying, for Gibraltar, that could turn the present nightmare into a perfect Brexit storm instead of the rainbow of opportunities that had been promised and hoped for, wrote Brian Rees, the editor of the Gibraltar Chronicle. Recently, for the ultra nationalist for Vox, choosing the stick over a carrot on Gibraltar would mean red meat to the wolves. Alberto Núñez Figido, that's how you say the PP leader, who paints himself as a moderate, tried to cool the concerns in Gibraltar when he unveiled the party's election manifesto, saying, we will restart a responsible dialogue with the British government to try and address the process of decolonisation of Gibraltar and the recovery of sovereignty in accordance with the doctrine of establishment by the United Nations, the manifesto says. A HM and customs officer, that's the photo, saying we will tackle the situation that has arisen after Brexit and defending Spain fiscal, financial, and environment and security interests, and pay special attention to the circulation of people. In Gibraltar, the tone of the man who could be Spain's next prime minister allays worries. For now, Jonah Aisha, the president of Gibraltar Chamber of Commerce, said the key was keeping the border open. I think what Fernando said was welcomed because the fluidity of the border is important for the businesses and for the family perspective, he told The Independent. Gibraltar families have a lot of connections across the border, and there are around 15,000 people who cross the border whose well-being is linked to what happens at the border. If Brexit happens as it was meant to happen, with checks at the border, it would be disastrous for cross-frontier workers. Under a temporary deal reached between London and Madrid back in 2020, most people crossing the border were waved through by the border officials. All this could come to a grinding halt if a new right-wing government in Spain adopted a very hawkish tone towards the Rock. Sometimes depicted as a very picture of the postcard back to the 1950s in the Mediterranean sun, Gibraltar is in fact very different. With its low tax, it is home to parts of the UK motor insurance industry, mainly the British betting companies and trade in alcohol and cigarettes because of its 0% sales tax. The Spain and, of course, the Spanish mainland, Gibraltar's mainstay, is roaring in illegal trade and smuggling in cigarettes. Spain has long claimed sovereignty of Gibraltar, despite ceding the isthmus back to Britain in 1713 under the Treaty of Utrecht. But the hard right Vox party, for them, Gibraltar is hugely symbolic. The party once unfurled a huge Spanish flag on the Rock as an act of defiance. When Rishi Sunak and Mr. Sunanez discussed Gibraltar and a deal with a telephone call back in May, Vox used this opportunity to spell out its hardline stance. Sinanto Albasquiel, the Vox leader, said that for Spain, anything less than recovering the sovereignty of the Rock would be a betrayal for Madrid. And Juan Jose Ucida, the Association of Spanish Workers in Gibraltar, said that many on both sides of the border were incredibly worried over the uncertainty of the Rock's future. We feel bad about the situation now, but we are expecting Gibraltar talks after the end of the Northern Ireland negotiations, but that did not happen, he said. Now we have something that we never expected, with a right wing coming up. It can mean that the situation could be very difficult for the people of Gibraltar and on the Spanish side of the border too. So all this, you can just see this. It could create a lot of problems. It is going to create a lot of problems. This could be a massive flashpoint because the hard right are determined to essentially get Gibraltar back at any cost. And as I said at the beginning, you could have a situation where the fact that, as we said before, there is no garbage dump in Gibraltar, that's across the border. They could say, we ain't accepting that. They could. They could make this a hard border. They could go back and they could really start playing a hardball on a lot of these areas. And ultimately, this is going to look like, to be honest, a massive Brexit flashpoint. It is going to be a massive Brexit flashpoint. And it is going to cause a lot of problems for the people living in Gibraltar. And because of Gibraltar's status as a massive tax haven, part of me really does want Spain to retake Gibraltar. But at the same time, part of me is like, well, if the Spanish right wing do retake this, then there's a lot of uncertainty about what they might try and do next in other areas regarding Spain. So it's a bit difficult for me to say I want them to do it. I'd much rather it be a negotiated and no saber rattling take place, and maybe sort of Vox isn't seen as the reason why they took back Gibraltar, so it isn't sort of like a complete victory for them. But like I said, it was said there, it's a massive tax haven, um, and it is something that I think should be addressed. Our government doesn't seem to really want to address it, but to be honest, if they lose Gibraltar, where are those companies going to go? Ultimately, they will probably move to the Isle of Wight, which is again something we need to take care of. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I'll keep an eye on this, but this is going to be, I think, a potentially developing situation, depending on how those local elections go. Well, not the local elections, how those elections go. If the Vox group, the right wing populist group, do gain any significant support, well, they're going to push whoever's in charge of the government to play hardball. And of course, if they don't get what they want, well, we'll collapse the government. And it can be very, very easy for the whoever may be the current prime minister to say, well, I'm not going to let this entire government collapse because you're wanting to play hardball with Gibraltar with the UK. So whatever, fine, we'll play hardball. So you don't know what political will happen in Spain. Like you say, I'm not too much on Spanish politics and what like that, but I know I do have some fans over there. So I'm sure they will be telling us down in the comments, particularly what might happen and all this stuff. So we'll see what happens. But this is again something that we will keep eyes on. But I'll tell you this now: if the UK does end up ceding Gibraltar to Spain, or at least giving back Gibraltar to Spain, then the Brexiteers are going to have an absolute meltdown. They are going to go into meltdown because here's the thing: if let's say things start picking up on the Spanish side, as it's been said here, what do you think those Brexiteers are going to start doing? Like, what do you think the Brexiteers here are going to start doing? It unfortunately, potentially, may become a rallying call, maybe to give them power. I doubt it would lead to any form of conflict or anything like that, but uh, certainly it might maybe convince them that they need to play hardline over this as well, and maybe they can look tough to the British voting public, because bear in mind we're going to a general election pretty soon, so could be something that they could use to say, look how tough we are being with Spain over the Gibraltar matter. Again, like I say, we'll keep an eye on it, what happens here, but to be honest, this if the right wing group do in Vox, if they do get any form of power, then they will probably play hardball over Gibraltar, and then you will start to see, as we said, maybe the garbage situation, that maybe they just close the border to that. Uh, we don't know. We really don't know what could happen there, but it's certainly very, very worrying. I'll tell you that now. Um, but like I say, we'll keep an eye on the situation and we'll see how this develops. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.